Only I said in the previous episode that the Russians slowed down somewhat as they started another spring aggravation. If we depict the numbers of clashes per day on a simple graph, it will look like this. Data up to May 8th inclusive. It is evident that within just one day, on May 8th, there was 146 clashes. Currently, this is the record day for the number of attacks throughout the war. Hey, my name is Alex, and this is a quick update on the Russian-Ukrainian war from the perspective of someone living within it. The hottest direction on this day turned out to be the Avdiivka direction, where Ukrainian defense forces repelled 45 attacks in just one day. The least amount of fighting was recorded on the Tavria direction, where the enemy unsuccessfully attacked our troops' positions 4 times. On the night of May 8th, Russian occupiers once again attacked Ukraine, delivering a combined strike with various types of missiles and UAVs. In total, the enemy employed 76 aerial attack assets, 55 rockets and 21 strike UAVs, fighter aviation, anti-aircraft missile forces of the air forces, mobile fire groups, and radio-electronic warfare units of the Ukrainian defense forces were engaged in repelling the aerial attack. As a result of the air battle, 59 aerial targets were destroyed, with a downing coefficient of 0.8, meaning 8 out of 10 missiles were intercepted. On the night of May 9th, the Russians conducted an attack using drones from Cape Chowda in Crimea. 20 UAVs of Shahid type were employed, out of which Ukrainian air defense forces destroyed 17 UAVs. The main targets for the Russians were Ukrainians' energy infrastructure objects, although civilian infrastructure also suffered. Such gifts after the night drone strike were encountered in Ukrainian cities. Ukraine responded to this attack with kamikaze drone strike on Russia oil refinery industry. It is known that the drones target an oil depot in the Krasnodar Krai. According to official Russian data, around 6 UAVs were suppressed, but several crashed within the oil depot territory. Local residents claimed there were at least 7 UAVs. Also, an oil refinery in Bashkortostan was hit. During the night, there was also a fire at a Russian-controlled oil depot in occupied Luhansk. Something also happened at the seaport of Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky. A fire broke out on the seaport on Thursday night, local time. Russian media reports that the roof of a building under construction caught fire. And now let's move on to the overview of the situation on the front. Kupiansk sector of the front. The Russian army continues to press on the settlement of Sinkivka. Here is how this settlement looks now, another Ukrainian village that has felt the arrival of the Russian world. On the Svatove sector of the front, high intensity of combat operations continues in the area of Kislivka and Kotlarivka. Attempts to attack Berestove have also been recorded. Significant changes have not been observed here. Further south of Krokhmalny, the 40th Artillery Brigade conduct remote mining with 155mm RAAM shells from the Krab self-propelled artillery unit. Result: a Russian armored column completely destroyed. Siversk direction. The enemy has entrenched itself southwest and northwest of Vesele, along the railways towards Vyimka and the east of the railway over an area up to 8.5 kilometers wide and 1.4 kilometers deep. These changes are clarifying and reflect the enemy's advancement over a long period. This area is not discussed as loudly as others, and obtaining information about it is quite difficult. Along the entire stretch, from Rozdolivka to Bilogorivka, the Russians attempt to break through the defense forces' positions. In particular, the enemy has concentrated airborne assault division units and recently been actively advancing in the Vesele area, moving along the railway east of the village. There are also attempts to storm the areas of Bilogorivka, Zolotarivka and Verkhnyokamyanka. The Russians are trying to break through to the city of Siversk, but for now they can only dream of taking this city. During the April fighting, there were episodes of a 2-day assault in the Russian-Ukrainian area. It was a powerful and seriously planned enemy operation. Footage shows the work of FPV operators from the 118th Cherkasy Territorial Defense Brigade on the destruction of enemy equipment. Footage is from April. The Russians understand that advancing through Bilogorivka is a futile endeavor. Although it's very challenging for our soldiers here, the Russians are experiencing significant casualties. There are reports of numerous casualties. This footage shows the work of Sova air bombers from the 81st Air Mobile Brigade in the Bilogorivka area. Therefore, Russians try to advance towards the village of Vyimka to flank the troops' concentration in Bilogorivka. Sometimes they storm with armor, sometimes only with sheer numbers of soldiers. So far without significant successes. To conclude this section, here are some recent shots from the Serebryansky forest. In this area, it is like a branch of hell on earth. Chasiv Yar sector. Chasiv Yar city holds strong, very strong. There are positions that Russians enter, thinking they have taken control of them, and then they never leave, because they are all killed in them. Or they replenish the exchange fund, which also happens frequently. For about a month now, the active duty unit Kraken of the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine has been defending the city. The enemy attempts to advance from various directions, but thanks to the coordinated work of the unit, there are currently no occupiers in the city. It is tough in Ivanivsky, where our guys are still stationed. It is very difficult to enter and exit the village. That is another challenge. Overall, despite the difficulty, it has been managed effectively in this critical front section. Footage shows the skilled work of strike drone operators from the strike drone company of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade in destroying the Russians' dugout in this direction. Recently, a destruction of a Russian self-propelled artillery Msta-S has also been recorded here, and there is a conversation in the Russian chat about their treatment of each other in the Russian army, which pertains to this same direction. A Russian woman complains that in the basement where her acquaintance, a soldier of a Russian army, was hiding with a few other soldiers, a Ukrainian shell hit, burying them, and nobody even attempts to dig them out. Avdiivka direction. This direction remains the most challenging. Having managed to break through the defense near Ocheretino, the Russians are attempting to exploit this tactical success. Footage shows the work of the Bradley crew of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade Magyura, which is engaging Russian positions and destroying enemy infantry with the 25mm M242 Bushmaster cannon near the village of Ocheretino. In the Novo-Alexandrivka, there are heavy fights on the outskirts. Also, the Russians have made progress towards Kalinove from Arkhangelsky, to the west of Solovyovo towards Sokil. And farther south, there is also slight enemy advancement. Intense battles continue on the outskirts of Novopokrovsk. In the eastern part of this village, a BMP Bradley destroyed a Russian T-80 tank. Fighters from the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade destroyed enemy equipment using a TOW anti-tank missile. Credit goes to the crew of Discovery 2nd Mechanized Battalion. The Russians themselves complain in chat that everything is mine in Novopokrovsk, plus there are a huge number of FPV drones. And as we recently saw from the video, the Ukrainian Bradley is also performing well here. To the west of Semenivka and in the area of Umansky, heavy fighting continues. In the latter, the enemy has raised the red Soviet flag on the monument to soldiers in the central part of Umansky, at the point marked on the map. Further west of Tonenki, the Shadow unit continues its glorious work of destroying abandoned Russian tank with M69 grenades. In this video, it's noteworthy that one detonating M67 hit 2 Russian tanks. Further south on the map, in Netilove and nearby, slight enemy advancement is noted. Further south of Peromysky, the enemy also had minor successes. Overall, the situation in this area remains very challenging. Kurachiv direction. Heavy fighting is underway in Krasnohorivka for the Krasnohorivsky fire-resistant plant, where the Russians does not cease attempts to seize the industrial zone. Battles are continuing for the northeastern part of the city, where the Russian has advanced along 1st May and Tchaikovska streets to a depth of up to 700 meters. Footage shows the aftermath of another Russian strike on the outskirts of the city of Krasnohorivka, providing a comprehensive view of the situation on this front. Veliko-Novoselivsky direction. Russian forces continue to exert pressure in the area of Urozhaine and Staromayorsky. Near the latter, the enemy has advanced up to 3.3 kilometers wide and 1.1 kilometers deep. The enemy continued to press on the southern outskirts of this settlement. Footage shows a damaged Russian APC moving from the center of Urozhaine towards the southern outskirts of the settlement. Meanwhile, the vehicle narrowly avoids several grenade launcher shots. Recently, the main Russian tactic has been to try to penetrate as deeply as possible and disembark infantry to establish a foothold. This tactic may be the most effective they have used, although it still does not demonstrate significant success. What it ensures, however, are numerous losses, but who in Russia pays attention to that? Robotyne sector. The situation remains very challenging and dynamic. Here, everything is scattered with the bodies and burned equipment of the Russians, but they continue to advance like zombies without pause. It's difficult for the Russians to establish themselves here, because they themselves have leveled everything to the ground. On this section, the tactic of breakthrough with the tank garages doesn't work. Therefore, the Russians often resort to suicidal attacks on motorcycles. For example, these Russian soldiers, judging by how frequently they fall and how fearlessly they ride forward, are clearly under the influence of alcohol or drugs. Suicidal Russian motorcyclists. And here you can also encounter suicidal attack on Chinese golf carts. Tavria sector. No changes have been observed in recent days. In the video, all that remains of the village of Kurenki. So, as we see, the situation on the front is indeed complex, and the Russians are clearly preparing to worsen it further by intensifying their offensive. But our army sees this, understands it, and draws conclusions. According to the guys in the front range, there is still a shortage of ammunition. Quote, "They did add some. But there is one catch. The shells themselves won't fly. We need powder and detonators. Some of it's here, but some is still missing. We are waiting. It is just a formality now. However, the supplies are indeed coming. From where it's unclear whether it is a Czech initiative or American aid, but we thank God, soon the artillery will be working well again." And what about the Russians? HIMARS, it is the nickname of the user, compared satellite images of one of the largest Russian towed artillery storage bases, Lesnoy Gorodok, for 2020s and 2024s. The images show that the Russians have depleted the base. In the updated images, it is evident that they have removed about 60% of the stored equipment. The rest of what remains may be unusable due to its age and condition. HIMARS predicts that arsenal with D-30, MT-12 and D-1, D-20 howitzers will be completely emptied by 2024. So by the end of the year, the Lesnoy Gorodok storage base will have only about 400 units left. Most of them will not be restored. Regarding the situation with tanks, an interesting post from a Russian familiar with the situation. He is concealing his country identity, calling Russia Laos, Marshal of Laos, Russian Defense Minister Shoigu, and so on. In short, Russians are not able to replenish losses at the speed they are occurring. Hence the attack of motorcycles and Chinese golf carts. And finally, the Russian military industry has pulled all its strength and made its version of the American HIMARS system. Now Kyiv will definitely be taken within the next 3 days. And if they implement such new developments made of plywood, probably even within 2 days. Of course, this is sarcasm about the Russian military power. They actually have a pretty powerful military complex, and they manufacture and use a lot of deadly stuff in the war in Ukraine. And they learn pretty quickly because they understand what's at stake. So it won't be easy for us, but Ukraine will crush them. They are no match for it. Ukraine gave birth to Moscovia, and it will bury it. So that wraps up today's video. If you found this information helpful or somehow insightful, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.